In this video, I'm going to show you an example of how to calculate a weighted mean. Hopefully, throughout the video, you'll be able to relate this to what we did the other day in class about a grouped mean. They're essentially the same thing, so I want you to be thinking about that one, the grouped mean that we did as we go through this example. So I have here certain scores that you got on certain categories for a course. Okay, so up there in green, you got on a quiz worth 10%, you got a 72, and so on. A test, 30%, you got a 95. Project, you got an 82. And class participation, the last one, which is only worth 5%, you got a 60. So we're going to find the average in the class so far. So let's set it up similarly to the way we did our grouped mean. So I'm going to make a little table here. I'm going to have the score that we got. Is going to really be our x. That's our variable. And then let's see. So let me put these in here. So this is our quiz. This is our test. Here's our project. And here is our class participation. So in the next column, just like we did a grouped mean, the second column was our frequency, which essentially weighted each class appropriately. Same thing here. We have to weight each score appropriately, right? We can't just add these four scores and divide because that's giving each an equal weight. Okay, so the next column we're going to do is going to be our weight, but it's really important to remember that that's going to be as a decimal. So the weight for our quiz, it's worth 10%, so that weight as a decimal would be 0.10. My 95, my test, that's good news because that is weighted much more heavily than the other categories, and that's worth 30%. We got a 95. Our project grade of 82 is worth 25%, so 0.25. And our last one, we got a low score, but luckily that's only worth 5%. So our weight for that one will be 0.05. All right, so think back to what we did next. How do we weight each one of these appropriately, right? In our next column that we're going to create, we weight them appropriately by taking each score, right, and timesing it by its weight, exactly like how we did the midpoint times the frequency before. So let's figure these out for each one. So if you got a 72 worth, and that's worth 10%, that is going to generate 7.2 points in your average when we multiply those. And likewise, when you do that 95 times 0.30, right, this is going to generate a lot more points because, well, first it's a higher score, but mainly because it's a much higher weight. My 82 on my project worth 25%, it generates 20.5 points in my average. And lastly, this one only generates 3. Not because, we'd scored lowly on that, but this is only worth 5%. So again, let's think back to what we did next, okay? If you can relate this to our grouped mean, the next thing we did on our grouped mean, I'm gonna come over here and build a formula for x bar. So let's build what we did so far. We took each x and we multiplied it by its weight. And so the next thing we're going to do is sum up that column. We're going to sum up that column. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to leave a little space for my formula. You'll see why. So let's start there. Let's do the sum of this column. Right? Whenever we see a sum in a formula, it means that we have to add up an entire column. Okay, so that's what we're going to do right here. We're going to sum up this column. And if you do that, I think you get a 59.2. So hopefully you stop and say, oh, my average can't be that low, right? I got a 95 on something worth 30%. So what are we missing here? Okay, we're missing the dividing. With a grouped mean, we divided by the sum of the frequencies, which was our n. In here, if I had all my semester grades, this next step would not really be necessary because if I summed up all my weights and if it was for the entire semester, I'd have 100%, which they would all the decimals would add up to 0.1. But if you notice over here, the sum of my weights right here is not 100%. It's not 1 because I'm only partway through the semester. So the sum of the weights here, if you add those up, is only 0.70. So part of our formula is we have to divide by the sum of the weights. Just like we divided by n for the grouped mean, which is the sum of the frequencies. So this 59.2 is going to make a lot more sense if we divide by the sum of the weights, which is 0.70. So like I said, if you had the entire semester's worth of grades, the sum of the weight would be a 1, and then we wouldn't have to divide by it. But if it's anything other than that, we have to make sure we divide by that. And this will make much more sense. I think if we divide this out, we get a 84.6. I used my rounding rule. My scores were to the nearest whole number, so I gave it to the nearest tenth, one more decimal place. So that would be my average at that point in the semester. Okay, so that is a weighted mean, and I hope that you saw the similarities between this and what we've done in class with the grouped mean.